Welcome everyone to JWI's virtual leadership lunch. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Meredith Jacobs. I am the CEO of JWI. JWI is the leading Jewish organization working to build a world that is safe and equitable for all women and girls. I have to tell you, publishers send me a lot of books, and usually they don't know anything about JWI. They just know our name is Jewish Women International. So I get a lot of cookbooks, which personally I love, and a lot of books about the Holocaust. But every once in a while, they nail it and send me a book about a phenomenal Jewish woman who breaks barriers and kicks ass. So Tracy Walder's book, The Unexpected Spy, was such a book. It is a riveting story, but even more so because it's about her actual life. And even though I'm a huge fan of Homeland and all those shows, who can't resist reading about a Jewish sorority girl from USC who was recruited to join the CIA right before 9/11? So think about the timing. Not only is tomorrow the anniversary of 9/11, but this week, once again, the vital work and importance of our intelligence community is once again in the news. So I'm not going to take up any more time, but with introductions, because I really want to get to our conversation. Although again, personal recommendation for the book, let you know that Ellen Pompeo's production company is developing it into a television series. And also, please read Jessica's novels, Summer of Naked Swim Parties, Drinking Closer to Home, and her latest, The Trouble with Lexi. This is now a webinar because we had so many registrants, but please throughout the conversation, just drop your questions into the chat or into the Q&A, and then 1:15, we'll start reading out those questions. But for now, I'm going to let Jessica and Tracy take it from here. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, I'm essentially just going to ask Tracy questions, but first I just want to tell you why I wanted to work on this book with her. And that is, I talked to her on the phone, and she was this smart, super smart, interesting, oh no, Tracy just disappeared. Oh no, Meredith disappeared. Smart, interesting, Jewish Southern California woman who did things that I wish I could do and lived a life that I wish I could live. And she was my hero. Who doesn't want to get to know somebody who lived an incredibly heroic life? But one of the things I learned through Tracy is sort of how, it's like, it's not that she wasn't born a hero. Of course, she was born with incredible intelligence, but that things didn't start out that way. And so Tracy, I just wanted to talk about, like, you overcame a lot. So when you were in junior high and a little bit in high school, you were bullied. And so you were the victim of bullying. And do you think this affected how you went forward in your life?
Yes. Well, first of all, one of the reasons I picked Jessica is because she is hands down one of the most creative people that I know. And she and I are really almost the same person. Just strangely, we're both these Southern California Jews, and she understood my growing up and I understood her growing up. And it was just this like match made in heaven, I guess. But growing up, I really actually, the bullying started in 3rd grade. Over silly things, my socks or my teeth or my acne. But it wasn't minor. It was pretty major. It was everyone. It was punching, it was hitting, it was kicking. And I think I sort of lived at a time, and this is not to say that my parents weren't great parents, they were. But, back in the 80s, 70s, it was very much of the mindset, what did you do to bring this on? And so I don't know that I was like defended a lot against the bullies. And yes, it made me very insecure. But the other thing is that it kind of made me not reliant on other people for things. I sort of just marched to the beat of my own drummer because I kind of had to, you sort of evolve in that way. And so I think maybe that's why, not the whole reason, but part of the reason that this impacted, my career choice.
Right. Right. So it's like you developed like a strong internal life, an interior life.
Mm-hmm.
So you could define yourself. I mean, these other people were defining you in these terrible ways and they were cruel, and you sort of defined yourself on your own, which even if people who aren't bullied, it's a good sort of thing to do. It's like, yeah, that's what's me. So, all right. And then you went to college. I mean, I know you're an introvert, and so, but you joined a sorority. And so you were somebody who came out of bullying, an introvert, but you joined a sorority and you kind of just went for it. And like, do you think sort of the sisterhood, like did this help, or did this change thing, or did this push you more towards who you are?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think I am an introvert, but I've learned an introvert isn't necessarily about being quiet, right? It's more about like, where do you get your energy to recover from? And mine is being alone, but that was a coping, mechanism from like third grade.
Right.
For me, I joined a sorority because I actually thought they did a lot of good, and they really do. It was a way for me to meet people. It was a way for me to be social. And I viewed college really is like a breaking free. Where I'm from in California, you went to elementary school, middle school, high school with the same people, which is why, the bullying just followed me through. But in college, really only like 3 people from my high school were also going to USC. And, USC is a bigger college. And it was this opportunity, I think, for me to like break free. And what was really great is that a lot of the girls in the house were doing things like pursuing internships, working at international companies in the summer. And that was sort of this eye-opening experience to me of like, oh my gosh, I can do all these different things. I didn't even know that these opportunities were available to me. And so that's when I started thinking more about ways that I could apply my degree.
Right. And you were history major and Chinese studies.
No, I was just a history major.
History major. Okay. And then you were going to be a teacher, like you were going to be a history teacher, and you had it all planned out. And then something happened. So I think.
So I went to college to be a high school history teacher. It was partly because I had a really influential teacher my junior year of high school who really made like American history come alive. He helped build up my confidence, and funny enough that everything came full circle. My first teaching job after I got my master's was actually working in his exact same classroom with him as my mentor. So that was kind of fun. But anyways, I just thought, there was some comfort in that. I loved history. So I thought that's what I'm going to major in. And I did, and I was really happy in that major. But I think I started seeing, my sorority sisters around me doing all these different things. And it's not that I felt like I was missing out, but I was starting to think of ways to apply my degree. And I interned at the LA Museum of Natural History. I interned for a senator. I started just thinking about all these different things I can do. But in 1997, I was sitting in my sorority house watching CNN. I know I surprised some people. And this guy, these two Peters, Peter Arnett and Peter Bergen, were interviewing this person that I had not really heard of, named Osama bin Laden. And, this was 97, right? These things are not terrorism. Yes, we had Oklahoma City, but I think we thought of it more as a problem over there. We had bombings in Nairobi, we had bombings in Beirut, but I think we thought of it as an issue sort of over there. But in that interview, he started talking about how much he actually disliked Jews. And, I think when you're, like 19, you think, oh, he's talking about me, because I was Jewish. And I think instead of like getting upset, I wanted to understand more like the why. Like, why does he hate us? What's terrorism about? Where did this come from? And shortly thereafter, there was a shooting at a JCC in Northridge. And so I just started to see sort of all of these things and started wondering, well, how can I like learn more about terrorism, and where can I work terrorism at? And we had to remember, again, this was before 9/11. So terrorism was not the issue like du jour, I guess. And so one day, USC has like this main thoroughfare called Truesdale Parkway. They had set up like, different companies had come to look for people to do internships and things like that. And I went with my roommate. She was looking at one company and I saw the CIA and that they were looking for like liberal arts majors. And I knew that that was me. And so I gave them my resume and I didn't really expect, a phone call. I'd love to tell you a sexier story than that, but it's really not.
But the amazing thing is, I mean, I just think like we are so like Jewish girls in Southern California. But while I was like thinking about boys and like applying too much eyeliner and going out to late at night, you were worrying about terrorists. And I wish I could say I was worried about terrorism.
But I was going out late at night and I was, wearing all my fun, there's like two sides to me, right? Like, so I never missed a party and I don't think badly of me, but I was vice president of my sorority. I went to all the parties. I had a good time, but I also cared about these other things too. And a lot of other girls in my house did as well. Sort of one side.
You cared about the world. I mean, I think this is why it makes you an incredible person. You were this young person that took this thing that was happening I think people are taking things more seriously now, but I feel like you were this young person at a time when people didn't even remember bin Laden's name after that interview. Most people still didn't know his name. Stayed on it. And it's almost why you turned out to be this amazingly heroic and successful CIA operative, because it was in you and you stayed on it. So once you were in the CIA, you were incredibly young. You came from Southern California. Suddenly you're out in Langley, Virginia. We can say Langley. I'm going to point out to everybody that we're not allowed to say where Tracy was when she was undercover. So we're going to talk about all these places where she was undercover, and we're just going to say Middle East. We can say Middle East and Africa, I think, and Europe.
Middle East, we can say Europe, we can say Africa.
And we can say Africa.
More than that.
That's as detailed as we can get about where so there's a lot of stuff we can't say. We can't say exactly where she was or exactly what she was doing, but she can still tell us a lot. So you started out, though, not in the Middle East, which we'll get to when you went to the Middle East, but you started out in Langley, Virginia, the CIA headquarters, reading maps. And you proved to be like this incredible map reader. You could see a blob and you knew it was a person and you knew what person it was. Or you could see a rectangle and you knew it was a house, a place where they're manufacturing weapons, chemical warfare. So you turned out to be this incredible map reader. And so why don't you tell them what happened from there right before September 11th?
Sure. So I sort of started out, I was put working counterterrorism, and I was really excited about that because that's what I wanted to do. When you start at the CIA, you don't get to tell them, where you want to go. It doesn't work like that. They place you. And so I worked on the operations side in the counterterrorism center. And one of the things that I did was target terrorist training camps. You're looking for activity, going
Frozen.
a little over a year or so. And then obviously, about a week before 9/11, my boss had selected myself and some other guys in my office to work on this classified program that's actually still classified today. In my book, it's under a chapter called The Vault, which I really did not think would get approved by them, but it was, so I was a little surprised. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, this is kind of a small group of us, and are we going to have to use this? Because I didn't really know what I thought about it. And, my boss was like, no, not until, not unless there's a big terrorist attack. And then obviously September 11th happened. And so really immediately after that, my life completely changed. I know this might shock people, but CIA was a rather stable, 9 to 5 kind of place. But, with 9/11, obviously we were working 24/7, particularly in that program, because it was a very, very small room. And there were just, really 3 of us on duty every night. and George Tenet, who was the head of the CIA, was in there regularly, would bring us, bagels, muffins, donuts, Thanksgiving dinner, all those kinds of things. He was really great. And, we had George Bush in there all the time, Dick Cheney, constantly. And also, Afghanistan and some of the other countries that we were looking at in the Middle East were 11, 12 hours ahead. And so, you're on a
11 and a half, I think it was.
Yes, you're on a weird time zone. And so, I was on duty working the night that we thought we had bin Laden located in a place called Tora Bora, but unfortunately, we lost him that night. That was in December, actually, of 2001. So I worked on that program for about 4 or 5 months, and then they rotated us off, not because we were doing a bad job, but it was extremely arduous, obviously, doing the work we were doing. And they wanted the Counterterrorism Center was rapidly expanding at that time and creating kind of these new offices, and they needed to put us
Right.
in those offices. And so I was placed in the Counterterrorism Center's Weapons of Mass Destruction group. And our job was to find terrorists who were looking to acquire, for me, I worked small scale poisons and toxins and use them against really any country, quite frankly. But that was really my main goal once I got into the new group that I was in.
Okay, so wait, can I just go back to the vault a little bit? So
Sure.
the vault, so it was highly classified. Nobody else in the CIA knew about it. So you had this really high classification. You were 22, you turned 23 on the Tora Bora? Or
Yes, I would have been
20.
23. Well, 22 when I started, 23 when I ended.
22 and 23 years old. You were the only woman in the program. You were in the highest security program in the CIA at the time. That was the highest security reading. It's called a reading when you're put in security. And you personally, this 22, 23-year-old woman, was dealing regularly with the head of the CIA, George Tenet, that most people just dreamed of speaking to. He was like, Moses walking around the CIA on the 7th floor, and President Bush. So here you were, this 23-year, and they're coming in and asking you what's happening in the world because you. Great, or we're not? Okay, I won't say too much. I mean, can we say what the room sort of is? The vault.
You broke up a little bit, Jessica.
You can't hear me? Am I back?
Mm-hmm.
Am I back? Can we say what the vault is? Like, can we explain the room a little bit, or are we not allowed to say? I can't remember.
I don't really think we can go into that much detail.
Okay. All right. So you were this one woman in the highest program dealing with the president, the vice president, and you were telling them what's going on in these other countries. How did you feel at the time? Like, did you ever think, oh, I'm this Jewish girl from Southern California and I'm watching the world and telling the president what's going on here? Like, did you ever sort of reflect on how huge that moment? No, how did you process it?
Well, no, it's funny because you have this problem with me when we write, and I know that. So, I think part of the problem, and this isn't bad, it's not good, it just is, but when you're in a very hectic, traumatic situation, you don't really have time. And it's not because people don't encourage you, it's just you don't have time to sit around and think about that moment, right? And so I really don't think I've reflected on any of it until I really wrote my book.
Yeah, right. It's like there you were. Yeah.
I think in some ways I'm probably a little stunted in terms of explaining things or thinking about the gravity of things, but I think that that's very normal. I think a lot of us would probably act like that, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just
right.
I don't know.
Well, and it was such intense work. I mean, you were working through the night, hardly sleeping in the day, and did you work 6 days a week? I think it was 6 days a week. 6 days a week through the night, keeping the world safe. I mean, it's just such an incredible thought. And I mean, I guess you didn't have time to think about it because you were in the middle of it and so focused. All right. So then then you were on weapons of mass destruction, and you were on chemical weapons. And it is in the book, so I know we can mention it, but you were sent to poison school.
Yes.
So do you...
Broke up a little bit. Well, I can tell you about poison school. So poison school, one of the things the CIA does that's really, really great is they love to really educate you sort of in what you're working in. And so they sent us to this like 2-week intensive course where we learned how to manufacture the toxins, how to use the toxins, and kind of research that was done, like the lethality and all of that on the toxins. So that was a really, really fun experience.
Sorry, I went out for a bit, but now I'm back.
Okay, I just came back on just in case you were still frozen.
It came back. All right. So I'm sorry. Do you tell them about poison school, which I love? And then I don't know if everybody understands this or not, but Tracy's book had to be sent to the CIA for approval. And the first time it came back, maybe 100 pages were blacked out, if not more, would you say? The second time it came back, maybe 70 pages were blacked out. And then the third time it was just, fewer blackouts. But a lot of poison school got blacked out at first. And I love it so much, but I just have to say she just did the most. All right, so then from poison school, you were sent overseas. Mm-hmm. And so here you were, this blonde Jewish American tracking terrorists who claimed as their goal that they wanted to kill American Jews. And how did that work for you? I mean, just tell us about the process of being there. And
so it was really interesting. So one of my big targets who actually became a bigger deal later was a guy named Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and he later went on to found something called Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or ISIS, but he was killed in a drone strike about 10-15 years ago. But he was like the poison procurer for Al-Qaeda, and so that's why he was one of our main targets. And I was allowed to put him in the book, probably because he's dead. I really don't know why, but everyone else I had to rename, but not him.
Right.
So, really our job was to find human assets that could give us information about, future attacks. And sometimes those human assets, given that, September 11th had happened, we had invaded Afghanistan at that point, sometimes those human assets do come in the form of detainees. And in my book, I do talk about enhanced interrogation. They let me talk about that, which was surprising, but they did. And I had lots of conversations with several different terrorists, and it was really interesting because, one, I guess to just bring up the issue of being Jewish. And I still wonder if I should have done something different to this day, but I was talking to a terrorist. We have a whole list of questions that we have to ask them aside from our own. And one of the things that I asked him was, hey, why do you hate Americans so much? What is your issue with Americans? And he's like, no, it's not Americans, it's the Jews that I hate. And I did put that in my book because as a Jew, I was thinking, like, how do I respond to this, or do I respond to this? Because you're kind of in this weird situation. If I tell him that I'm Jewish, I might not get information from him to stop chemical and biological attacks. And if I do tell him I'm Jewish, though, I had built up a rapport with him. I'm not sure that he respected me necessarily because of what was happening to him, but we have built up a rapport. And part of me was like, I want to tell you I'm Jewish because we've built up this rapport, and I want you to see that we're not all. I ended up not telling him I was Jewish because I thought, we've got to protect the homeland over that. But a part of me to this day wonders, like, if I did tell him, how that could have been different. I don't know. I struggle with that one a little.
Well, I know, and a lot of it is in the book, that you were incredibly successful getting information.
Yes.
And you didn't tell him, and you did save the world in ways that we can't say in the book and we can't even say now, but you did save countless, we can't even put a number to it, the number of people through the information you got by developing a relationship with the terrorists. And
Yes.
and I don't know if everybody understands, but Tracy, the detainees, Tracy would visit them over and over and over again and build up a relationship to get information from them. And do you think, as a woman, because you were in these places where you were, particularly in the Middle East, you were probably the only woman, or often, not always, but often the only woman who interrogated these, and often it was lots of different men, and you managed to get information that really, a lot of these, the way these things were stopped were hinged on the information that you got. Do you think that you were a woman, or that you were Jewish, or that you were young, or that you were from Southern California? Do you think, like, what do you think, how do you think it was that you were able to get information that other people couldn't?
So I think that's part of why, my mission now is educating girls and getting them into national security jobs. I read an article, I think it was last March or April, I can't remember, by the head of Mossad, who is a male, and that's the Israeli CIA equivalent, basically. And it's a really long article about the 8 reasons of why he feels that women are better spies and better collectors of human intelligence than men. And it was a fascinating read. I won't go over all 8, but some of the ones that he stated obviously resonated with me, in that they're inherent. We think a lot about in these jobs about hard skills, being strong, carrying a weapon, all those kinds of things. But actually what's more important, in my opinion, are soft skills. So, and that's what he was talking about. And he was saying that there's some that are just more inherent to women. So the idea that he felt that women were better listeners. Women can listen differently than men. Women are active listeners, whereas men don't tend to retain information. He wasn't, slamming men. I think he was saying we need both. And empathy. He felt that women had a higher degree of empathy than men. And those traits, when you're talking to a human asset, whether it's someone who's in detention or someone who's not in detention, go a long way, because they have to trust you. And if they don't think you're listening to them, and if they don't think you're empathizing with them, they're not going to give you the information that you need, no matter how big you are, how strong you are, and how many guns you have. It's just the way it is. It all comes down to people skills. And that article really resonated with me, because we don't talk about those soft skills enough. And I think that's why sometimes we don't associate these jobs with females. We associate them with men because we assume, I guess, I don't know how to say this, but I guess that bigger is better, right? Masculine is better. And that's not always the case.
Right. And so do you think, some of the people that you spoke to killed as many people, more people than any American mass murderer. But were you able to find a place of empathy? Like, were you able to see them as human, and did that get you somewhere? Did that help?
And what helped me the most, obviously, I don't know that I want to say I empathize with them, right? Because obviously I'm not a terrorist, and I could never imagine doing something on that magnitude. But asking them basic questions, why did you become a terrorist? Why did you? It helps me understand, where they're coming from. What's your favorite food? And then bringing them that favorite food every day. Just those small things, even though maybe I was sort of, I guess, faking my empathy, I was still connecting with them, even if it was on a basic level.
Right. So you would humanize them, and then together they would give you information.
Yes.
And then you traveled around the Middle East. We can't say where. I know you had to ride in the trunks of car. You often had to ride in the trunk of a car because nobody could see you. You definitely had to wear a hijab, or you put a pashmina over your head. And you had to work with the operatives from other countries, from Middle Eastern countries. And all of those operatives, I think 100% of the ones that you worked with from other countries were men. Like, you never met a female.
In the Middle East and Africa, yes. In Europe, obviously I was.
Right, in Europe there were a lot of women you worked with. In the Middle East and Africa, another country that was a woman. They were all men. And and some of them called you Malibu Barbie. You walked in and they thought you looked like Malibu Barbie and they called you Malibu Barbie. And yet you persisted and you kept taking down terrorists and undercovering plots. Did you find the sexism or the low expectations? Like, how did you respond? I mean, I think there were probably implied low expectations in calling you Malibu Barbie that you're not going to be. But how did you respond to that? Like or did you respond to it?
I will say though, that was only one service that treated me like really badly. Most of the others, really all of the others, could not have been more respectful. They were very respectful. They would listen to what I had to say. No issues there. What I will say in that instance, it's hard to know. I had time to think about it now since I've written the book, and that was a particular station where we, in general, had a really bad relationship with that service because the CIA's chief of that station didn't care about terrorism at all. And so already we had this like really acrimonious relationship. So we were sort of walking into this, like, I guess, lion's den, if you will.
Right.
And so it's hard to know if they were sexist or if they were just being a pain.
Right.
A pain. I don't know. But anyway, what was really great is that, I had a male colleague that I was with, and sometimes it's really important to have male allies. And, basically what he told that service when they called me that was like, you can say whatever you want to her, but you're going to have to listen to her because it's not me that's talking. So, get over it. So that was like really helpful in that instance. Because I know a lot of times as women, we got to do it all ourselves. But I also think having males who support you are important too.
Yeah, that's me. And then also, I mean, it's interesting because, as we started, you were bullied as a kid, and here you are as an adult, super powerful, incredible success. And for the women and girls who don't know, but Tracy was given all sorts of awards at the CIA for her service, and we can't even tell you what she got them for, but the CIA would recognize certain things that she did and she'd get these awards. So
He's frozen.
Am I frozen? So but in a way it's like the bullying all over again, and you just push through it. And
I didn't feel like I was being bullied there. That was definitely more at the FBI. I didn't really feel bullied by those intelligence services because, there was a lot of politics behind it, and the FBI, I definitely felt bullied.
Okay, well, that's all right. So let's get to so you traveled the Middle East. We'll get to the FBI. You traveled all over Europe. You took down a whole bunch of terrorist plots, things that would have happened had you not stopped them. You had one of the highest security clearances in the CIA, just huge success. And then you were in conditions like, you'd ask to use the bathroom and you'd be given a bucket in the closet and things like that. I mean, you weren't staying at the Four Seasons, although I think you did maybe once. But
yes, one time is awesome.
Yeah, but in general, this isn't luxury travel. So you were thinking that you wanted to stay home, meaning in the U.S., and still continue saving the world. And you applied to the FBI and you got in. And starting at Quantico, which is where the FBI trains, there were a few women. There were like 6 women. Is that what we counted? 6 women, and then how many? 100 men or something? Or
no, 34. So it was 40.
Okay, 34 men, 6 women. And I think you were the only Jewish person there at Quantico, right? Yeah, I think you were the only Jewish person. You were one of 6 women, and you were the only Jewish person. And maybe tell them what happened at Quantico with the FBI, or how it was different than the CIA.
It's hard because I left the CIA. It's hard to leave something when you're like successful there. A lot of people just want to think, well, maybe she wasn't successful, that's why she left. But No, I still talk to my former division chief. I've been emailing with him actually quite a bit. He's been very supportive. I still have friends that I talk to every single day from there. I didn't leave because I didn't like it. I loved it. But I was really tired of constantly traveling overseas. And I think maybe that would have changed once, September, like once everything sort of died down, but it wasn't changing anytime soon. And that's what the agency is. I can't ask them to change that. And so I thought, well, I could still do this work, but I can work in one place if I switch over to the FBI. And so they came, they did my background investigation, came to CIA, all that kind of stuff. And I would say from day one, it was horrible. I think, when you start at Quantico, you go around and you have to say, who you are, what you used to do, just sort of the pleasantries. And, I said, I'm Tracy, I worked at the CIA, and everyone just rolled their eyes and basically started a rumor that I never worked there, which, you came to headquarters to do my background investigation, but okay. And I think the problem was, and now that I've reflected on it, was definitely the leadership. The head supervisor of my class just went along with it. He could have had the opportunity to say, guys, knock it off, what are you doing? But he didn't. And I think, I remember one of the first 2 weeks, you have different sections of training. And in one of my first 2 weeks, it's light, so you're doing interviews, right? You're learning how to interview suspects, and you role play with the teachers that are there. And so we do have a uniform that we wear at the academy, but they ask that we wear a suit to practice those, because really that's what you wear out in the field. And so I wore a suit that I had worn, I don't know, for 4 years at the CIA. You briefed a lot of people, and I didn't even think twice about it. But I, got pulled aside by one of my class counselors that I had to apologize to my instructor because my suit made him uncomfortable. Jessica's really good at helping me write different renditions of that letter. But in the long run, I just wrote that I was sorry. The other thing, my first roommate at the academy, she let me know that she was a lesbian. Her wife might be calling,
Sorry.
And that was fine with me. I definitely didn't care. It didn't bother me at all, but I think she took my comfort with it and told the whole class. And they started teasing us that we are lesbians and all of that. And she actually quit the academy because of all of that. The other issue that I had, just so many ways that I was singled out. A gentleman in my class, his grandfather died when we were, training. And so they let him go to his funeral. Well, my grandfather died during my training, and being Jewish, we have to, bury right away, and they would not let me go. I think it was just they wanted to see me fail. But instead, I used that and obviously succeeded in the training. I think another thing they didn't like about me was that I am incredibly feminine. It's just who I am. I never had a problem at CIA being feminine. And I think what was upsetting is they almost associated being very feminine and being a woman with being less than and less than capable. And if I didn't masculine myself up, I wouldn't be taken seriously. But I think it was one of those situations where I'm passing the same test you are. I'm physically passing all the PT tests that you are. I'm passing all the weapons qualifications. Is it bothering you that someone who's feminine is doing all of this? And it was a bad experience, but I did make it through the academy because I thought, this will change, hopefully, once I get into my office.
Right. And then, right. they essentially, yeah. And also, didn't you have a higher security clearance than all the people who were training you just from coming out of the CIA? From what you?
No, that was more of an issue later. That wasn't, you don't really care too much about that.
Right. So then you went and you were in Southern California in the FBI. And I think, were you the only woman in your FBI office, or there was one other oh, there was one other woman that you went through her stuff. Yeah. You helped her. So you were the only woman, one of only two maybe women in that bureau. And here you had traveled the world, had been in the Middle East, had been undercover under a pseudonym. You had traveled around, you'd stopped terrorist plots, you'd done all this stuff, and in the FBI, they didn't. And you had studied a lot of Chinese. You were history major. Utilize your talents in the FBI, or they didn't want to utilize your talents in the FBI. So just what happened there?
Bother me too much. I'm pretty laid back about that kind of stuff. I just take it as an opportunity to learn something new. They didn't put me in counterterrorism, which, I mean, I guess you would assume that they would, but they didn't. They put me working Chinese counterintelligence because I had a human clearance from the CIA, and that's what they needed. So I think they just cared more about my clearance level than probably the work that I had done, which, I mean, honestly, that didn't bother me as much. I mean, yes, I wish I was working counterterrorism, but I think I always thought, well, I could do this, I'll learn, and I can always transfer to a different, unit. It didn't bother me as much. And the work that I was doing was interesting. I got to go in the back of trash trucks and, I mean, I don't think the work bothered me so much as the way that, the colleagues treated me.
Which was blatant sexism.
Yes.
So they treated you like the girl.
Yes.
Right. So even though you could do everything they did, you had like incredible, I know you're shooting, you're like a good shooter or whatever.
I think it was really just, the FBI, it was interesting because my supervisor was moved to our office from a different office because he was a problem at the other office. And so it's like, they don't get it. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. And I think it's funny because I in talking to my mom, about the book, I thought that I did something wrong because I never filed a complaint. And it's not in the book because my mom told me after, Tracy, you did file a complaint. And I think I was so traumatized that I had blocked it out.
Right. Yeah.
But I had filed a complaint, and it's funny, it hasn't changed. I mean, there's a lawsuit right now with 17 women who are all filing suit claiming gender discrimination by the FBI. So I had hoped things had changed.
Right.
They have not.
They have not. And would you, such sexual discrimination at the FBI, would you have stayed? Like, you enjoyed the work?
I think I would have. I mean, I do think I would have. I don't know that I minded the work that I was doing. It was just so toxic that it overcomes the good work that you're doing.
Right. And then I know it's 1:15 and Meredith wanted to ask question or answer.
Yes, we have so many questions are coming in through both the chat and the Q&A. So again, if you're listening and you have a question, please type it in. So the first was, Sue was asking really how you were able to work with the terrorists. Why did they accept communication and collaborate with you? How does that work?
They don't really have a choice. I think I talk about enhanced interrogation in my book. Enhanced interrogation is not about getting answers from them. No one's going to give you an answer under duress. Enhanced interrogation is making them more subdued and sort of understanding their role. So I think had that not been, I'm trying to talk around this. So had that not been done, I think she's right. I don't know that they would have talked to me necessarily, but I don't know that they had much of a choice.
Right. They couldn't ignore your text, right?
Correct.
Samantha wants to first of all say hello as a fellow sorority alumna, but she's very interested in cybersecurity and working for the government and wants to know if you have any tips or suggestions to find a job or an internship in the government.
Sure. I don't know, Samantha, how old you are, but there's a really great organization that's out that I sit on the board of. It's called Girl Security. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and one of the things they do is aim at getting women in national security careers. So they pair women up with mentors in the specific fields that they're looking to get into. So, cybersecurity, I know that there's women who are particularly like that's what they do, and they help with resume building, mentoring, and bringing those resumes sort of to the forefront, to get women jobs in these careers. So I think that would be the first thing that I would do. It's just girlsecurity.org.
That's fantastic. I mean, as
Mhm.
Jessica kind of brought up in her question so often, that you were always the only woman in the room at the table, and to have had someone else to go to kind of help you navigate that landscape, I think in any field, we know
Yes.
that mentors and champions are so important. Um, so Jennifer is asking, were you able to tell people what you did for a living? When you were sitting around at Thanksgiving, could you say, oh, yeah, my job at the CIA, or did you have a cover story?
So again, part of it's pop culture, right? That we just assume these things. 99.99% of people that work at the CIA are what we call overt employees, meaning you can tell people what you do. You'd be surprised by the people that have cover. Folks in human resources, folks in finance, our travel agents, those kinds of folks are the folks that actually have cover. So it's not as, I guess, sexy as what she thinks. However, when you go overseas, at least for me, I had cover. So in the US, I could tell people I worked there. But part of why Jessica and I realized we were being too locational, that was what was kept getting deleted in our book, was because when I went overseas, I was not Tracy Chandler. I was in a completely different name, alias, address, everything. And so that is classified. So and I'm just pulling a country out of anywhere, I can't say in Turkey, I did this, 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 and this, because it was my alias Jane Smith who actually did this, 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 and this. And so cover works kind of differently than what I think people expect.
So even though that was decades ago, if that were to come out, is the concern that it would compromise current agents that are out in the field?
So this is part of the problem. It would compromise other countries, right, who maybe shouldn't be allowing us to come in to do work. But then also, and this, I'm sure your viewers are going to think I'm a terrible person. There are congressional hearings against folks that participated in enhanced interrogation and those kinds of things. And other countries are very mad at us for doing that, which is why I had cover.
Someone was asking, and it's interesting that you bring that up, were you ever involved in anything? And you may not be able to answer this, that maybe you felt uncomfortable or compromised. Like, how did you handle some of those situations that may have been a little more challenging?
I don't think I ever felt uncomfortable, but again, you don't have the time to, reflect on, oh gosh, this is making me uncomfortable right now. Um, so,
Also, can I just point out, there's a lot, there's racism exists and people get put on do not fly lists because maybe they have an Arab name. But the people that Tracy was dealing with were always known terrorists who had already killed numerous people. So she wasn't ever dealing with some guy pulled out of an airport because of a name. She was dealing, so I think for her, it's hard to think that somebody doesn't deserve to be detained when you know for a fact and they admit that they've killed many, 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 many people. So she was dealing with such high level people that it was a different sort of mental state. She was really saving the world from these people.
And on that note, I think you're absolutely right. And I think we're also, those of us who aren't part of the intelligence community, are seeing it through the lens of Hollywood, and also looking back on whatever lens, as opposed to being in the moment. And again, immediately after 9/11 and when all of these things are happening. But currently, some of the things, and again, I'm not sure if you can answer this, that are coming out that the current administration is doing to kind of really delegitimize almost the intelligence community. As a former intelligence officer, what's your response to that? How do you feel? Can you speak to the importance, the vital importance of the work?
So that, Meredith, is why I wrote my book. You hit the nail right on the head, and I don't mean to get political at all. I don't want to ostracize anyone for their views, but I was very upset by the way that the intelligence community was being treated by Trump. And that is why, because I get questions, you wrote it a bit after you left. Why did you do that? And I was upset. I was really mad because I felt, look, no organization is without its flaws under any circumstances. But this was from a person who was not reading intelligence briefings, who had an acrimonious relationship with the agency and was really like diminishing their ability, both the FBI's and the CIA's. And when you do that, you are feeding into this conspiracy theory culture, and that is incredibly dangerous. Like I said, it's not like CIA is without its flaws. They absolutely have their flaws. But when you are debasing an agency that's at the cornerstone of predicting threats and analyzing threats, you are basically telling the United States, look, if CIA tells us there's another September 11th happening, don't listen to them, don't bother, because we don't trust them. And that is a huge, huge problem. Also, the agency, in my opinion, I worked there under two presidents with two different political ideologies. And what was so great about both of them is that neither of them politicized it. It was just about information. And I think that's a problem as well. I got very angry. And so that's why I wrote my book.
Amazing. Can you speak to, and somebody asked why you're no longer working for the government? I mean, I think you kind of addressed that with some of the issues that you faced at the FBI, the kind of toxic culture that you were dealing with, and that maybe you would have stayed. I know also from hearing you speak previously in person, you talked about also wanting to start a family and having that stability and kind of better. Can you talk a little bit about your life now, what you're working on, and do you miss some of the CIA stuff?
So I'm a teacher and a professor. So I'm an adjunct professor at Texas Christian University. I teach criminal justice there and women in policing, which for me is awesome because they, interestingly, at TCU have never had a former law enforcement officer teach that class who is a female. And the ratio there is 65% female to males at TCU. And there's overwhelmingly more women in that class. And I think it's really good for them, to see women who did these things. And then also as a teacher, I teach at predominantly all girls schools for about 14 or so years now. And I created a class about terrorism and national security to get women interested in these fields. In fact, I have to go teach in an hour my terrorism class to a bunch of girls, and to get them interested in these kinds of jobs. Now, I don't think they have to work for the CIA or the FBI. What girl security does is it exposes them to a plethora of different national security jobs. But that's, I'd say, more my mission now.
And she has an adorable daughter. Really good.
And there are a couple of people on the call who've already said that they're interested in pursuing national security or intelligence. I know you mentioned girls' security, is it the website? Aside from that, from those who might still be students in college or in high school, is there a path you recommend? You were a history major, but would you suggest more engineering or tech, or is there room for everyone? Is there something about the liberal arts that also teaches us how to think and evaluate and analyze?
So I think it's sort of all, so just a caveat, girls security works with junior high, high school, college, and after college, just so everyone knows. So depending on the age, there is a place for you there. I get that question a lot about, is there a formula, that I can give people for a resume? And everyone wants that, right? Because they want to be able to control, what they can do and how they can be successful. And, I've had a couple students who have gone into the agency and they've been in several different careers. One she was an engineer. She had absolutely no interest in national security, but she took my class and then decided to do an internship at the CIA in college, and then they offered her a job from there. I have another one that was an English major, who again really had no interest, but she pursued a career actually at it was an international law firm. I cannot remember exactly what type of law, but that got her really, really interested in it, and she began applying for jobs. You know, they do have language needs, obviously, there too. Those change all the time, so I would definitely look at their website. But, you know, a lot of people assume, well, I have to have Arabic, I have to have Chinese, I have to have majored in international studies. I mean, those things obviously are good and help, because within those departments, particularly in college, they can expose you to internships and connections and things like that. But I think that you can still be an English major and have critical thinking skills, but then seek out those internships in different ways. So I think it's more about the things you don't want to have on your resume. And I did an Instagram live, not yesterday, but the day before, with a similar question. And that's what people don't think about. It's the things you don't want to have on your resume. For example, if you worked at the Peace Corps, you may not for 10 years. The Peace Corps is a non-negotiable. You cannot have worked there and work and have a security clearance.
Interesting. Why is that?
Exactly. And so that's the thing. It's actually more about the things you shouldn't have on your resume than the things you should have.
No, but what about the Peace Corps kind of dings you for?
It's not that the mission of the Peace Corps is bad. The mission of the Peace Corps is fabulous. It's that, so the CIA, when they're clearing you, doing your security clearance, their biggest thing is they want to make sure you're not going to give information, classified information, to other countries. And they feel that if you have worked in the Peace Corps, you've obviously built a relationship with whatever country you were assigned to. And they need you to have some space with that. And they look at that space as 10 years. And so, you know, it's things like that. You know, you want to be careful about the different countries that you've traveled to and spent a lot of time in. I think that's more what people need, especially people that are international relations folks. They seem to think, oh, I want to go to China, I'm going to live in China. Well, you're not going to get a job at the CIA if you do that. And so I think,
does that count also for, like, let's say those kids are doing internships at local embassies? Would that also, or the CIA sees like, okay, they were an international relations major, it was a 6-week internship?
I think the CIA would see that as poor judgment. You know, I think the CIA would look at that and say, what are you doing interning at the Chinese embassy if you want to work here? Why would you do that to yourself? And I know that sounds really harsh, but I get the question, what should I have on my resume, so much that no one's thinking about things that are no-goes, on resumes more.
Fabulous. Okay, one final question and then we'll wrap. People have been asking about how your Jewish identity came into play. Did people finally know, at the FBI or the CIA, that you were Jewish? Did your coworkers know? How were you treated? Did that affect things at all in any way?
Being Jewish at the agency was great. I had no issues. I had a colleague like in the next office. We became really good friends, and she was from the main line in like the Philadelphia area, and so we could drive to her house. Whereas like we couldn't drive to California, so I would go to her house for the high holidays, and hang out with her, and so it was. I had zero issues. No one cared that I was Jewish, which I know sounds terrible. I mean, my colleague had like a Jesus nightlight because he was an atheist and like thought it was funny. Like, no one there really cared. They do sort of try to keep you away from Israel stuff, not because they think it's bad, but because they think that, you have empathy for the Jewish state, which I do. And for the same reason that they wouldn't want someone interning in Cuba, they wouldn't want, a Jew dealing with the Mossad as much, which fine, I get it. But no, at the FBI, people knew I was Jewish. I don't remember people like caring all that much. I don't remember my religion being a problem, but the one thing I do love is that this is going to sound bad. I feel like, this is a Jewish audience, so I can say this. I grew up, at a time where, we had security guards at my temple. I know we still do have that today. But I think I grew up with not a lot of exposure to Islam, and the Middle East. And I think I thought that they were like an enemy, all of them. And I'm a little ashamed to admit that, but I'll admit that. And I think spending time there and meeting people there really helped me develop actually interest in their religion and better understanding of like what terrorism was, is that it's not Islam. And so I don't know, it was great being Jewish, to be honest with you. I mean, I was definitely in the minority, but I don't think it ever worked against me.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, it's 1 o'clock. We have to wrap. I want to thank you both. Tracy, thank you for your service and for
Thank you for having me.
everything that we know and everything, more importantly, that we don't know that you did. So thank you. Thank you both for your time. Thank you to all of you who attended. You will be getting an email following up with a recording of this session, as well as links to buy all the books. And for those of you under 35 watching, I hope you'll consider signing up for our Young Women's Leadership Networks. Those of you over 35 can now be part of our Women's Impact Networks, and I hope to see you soon. Sign up if you haven't. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'm once again moderating our Jewish Women's Meet the Press, our roundtable with editors from The Forward, JTA, and special guests, and we'll be talking about Israel, COVID, and 9/11. So I hope to see you all soon, and thank you.